Captain James Miller stood at the main window of Earth Defense Station Alpha, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The sight before him would have seemed impossible just a week ago. The massive quantum gate, humanity's link to the wider universe, was powering down. Its usual bright blue glow faded to a dull gray, leaving only the distant stars to light the void. "Sir, we're receiving the final transmission from the Galactic Council," said Officer Tom Brown, his voice shaking slightly. The young man's usual neat appearance was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes and dark circles under his eyes. None of them had slept much since the announcement. Miller nodded without turning. "Put it on the main screen." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the stern face of High Counselor Vale. The alien's crystalline features might have once seemed beautiful to Miller. Now they only reminded him of ice. "This is the final notice to all civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy," Vale's translated voice echoed through the command center. "The quarantine is now in effect. For the safety of the greater universe, all quantum gates will be deactivated. The corruption in your galaxy's space-time fabric cannot be allowed to spread." Miller's jaw tightened. Corruption. They still haven't explained what that even means. Around him, the command center staff watched in silent despair. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 15 years ago. They were still learning, still growing, still trying to prove themselves worthy to the advanced civilizations that looked down on them as barely civilized primitives. "We regret this necessity," Vale continued, though her tone held no real regret. "Your galaxy will be sealed until the corruption has either been contained or has run its course. May the universe grant you mercy." The transmission cut off abruptly. "Sir," Brown's voice cracked. "The Centauri gate just went dark. That's the last one." Miller finally turned from the window. The command center, usually bustling with activity, was eerily quiet. 20 faces looked back at him, waiting for words of leadership, of hope. They weren't just his crew anymore. In many ways, they represented all of humanity, abandoned, isolated, but not broken. "Send a message to Earth Command," he said, keeping his voice steady. "All gates are down. We're on our own." The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Reports flooded in from Earth's colonies and outposts. 3 million humans were stranded on alien worlds beyond the gates. Countless alien visitors were stuck on Earth and its colonies. The galaxy's economy, built on intergalactic trade, was collapsing. Late that night, Miller sat in his office, reviewing emergency protocols that no one had ever expected to use. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Enter." Dr. Susan Wells, the station's chief scientist, walked in. Her gray hair was messy, and her eyes were red, but her voice was firm. "Captain, I've been analyzing the Council's final messages. Something doesn't add up." Miller gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Go on." "They said they detected this corruption 3 months ago," she said, sitting down. "But our instruments show nothing unusual. More importantly, why quarantine an entire galaxy without even trying to help? The Council has technology far beyond ours. They could have at least attempted to fix whatever they claim is wrong." "You think they're lying?" "I think they're afraid," Wells said. "Not of some corruption, but of something else. Something they don't want to admit." Miller leaned back in his chair, considering her words. "Fear makes people do terrible things. I suppose even advanced aliens aren't immune to that. What do we do now?" Miller stood and walked to his office window. Earth shone below them, beautiful and deceptively peaceful. "We do what humans have always done, Doctor. We adapt. We survive. The Council might have turned their backs on us, but they've forgotten something important." "What's that?" "Humanity's greatest achievements didn't come when things were easy. They came when we had no choice but to succeed." He turned back to her, his expression determined. "Send a message to all Earth defense stations. As of now, we're on heightened alert. If there really is something wrong with our galaxy, we'll face it ourselves. And if we can't..." Miller smiled grimly. Then we'll find a way to change the rules. It's what we humans do best. In the darkness of space, the dead quantum gates orbited silently, their metal frames catching the light of distant stars. The universe had turned its back on humanity, but in doing so, it had no idea what it had unleashed: the untamed, unstoppable force of human determination. 5 years had passed since the quantum gates went dark. Commander Anna Roberts watched her radar screen with tired eyes. Another long night shift on Defense Station Beta was coming to an end when every alarm in the control room suddenly blazed to life. "Commander," the young radar operator's voice cracked with panic. "Something's appearing in the Proxima Centauri system." Roberts straightened in her chair. The main screen showed a mass of swirling darkness spreading across space like spilled ink in water. As they watched, it devoured the light of distant stars. "Get me a better image," she ordered, keeping her voice calm despite the fear growing in her chest. The crew worked better when their leaders stayed steady. The enhanced view made her blood run cold. The dark mass wasn't just a cloud. It moved with purpose. Inside it, shapes twisted and turned like living shadows. This had to be what the Galactic Council had feared. "Ma'am, we're getting distress calls from the mining colony on Proxima B," reported Communications Officer Mark White. "They're under attack." Roberts hit the emergency broadcast button. "This is Commander Roberts. All ships in range. Move to protect Proxima B. This is not a drill." "I repeat, this is not a drill." The response was immediate. 3 Earth defense ships, built from a mixture of human innovation and salvaged alien technology, jumped into action. Roberts watched as they approached the dark mass. "Energy weapons having no effect," came the report from the lead ship. "It's like shooting at smoke." Roberts thought quickly. In the 5 years since the quarantine, humanity had been preparing for something like this. They'd developed new weapons, new strategies. It was time to use them. "Switch to the pulse bombs," she ordered. "Pattern Delta." The pulse bombs were purely human technology, primitive by alien standards. They created waves of disrupting energy based on old nuclear technology, something the abandoned colonies had plenty of. The first bomb exploded in a flash of blue light. The dark mass recoiled. A high-pitched screech filled their communication channels, making everyone cover their ears. "It's working," someone shouted. "The entity is retreating from the blast zone." Roberts leaned forward. "All ships, concentrate fire. Don't let it regroup." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it was over, the dark entity, which they later named the Voidborn, had fled back into deep space. The mining colony was damaged but saved. Only then did Roberts allow herself to breathe normally again. Back at Defense Station Beta, Roberts faced a room full of military and scientific leaders. The station's main meeting room was packed as she gave her report. "The Voidborn, as we're calling it, seemed to hate our pulse bomb technology," she explained, pointing to the battle footage. "Our simpler weapons worked better than the advanced alien tech we've been using." Dr. Wells, who had been studying the battle data, stood up. "It makes sense. These creatures appear to be made of corrupted spacetime. The Council's advanced technology works by manipulating spacetime. It's probably what attracted these things in the first place. But our primitive nuclear-based weapons, they're like a punch in the nose to these entities." Captain Miller, now an admiral, smiled for the first time in days. "So our backwards technology might be our greatest weapon." "More than that," Roberts said. "We're getting reports from across the galaxy. Other civilizations are falling to these Voidborn, but we can fight them. We can win." As if to prove her point, a message flashed on the main screen. It was from the Arcturus system, home to one of the alien races that had always looked down on humans. "They're asking for help," White reported, surprise clear in his voice. "Their defenses are failing. They want to know if we'll share our weapon technology." Admiral Miller looked around the room. 5 years ago, they abandoned us, called us primitive. Now they need those primitive humans to save them. He stood up. Well, we're going to help them. Not because we have to, but because that's who we are. Roberts nodded. I'll prepare a response team. We'll need to teach them how to build and use the pulse bombs. And Commander, Miller added as she turned to leave. Good work today. You just proved that humanity isn't just surviving in this abandoned galaxy. We're becoming its best hope for survival. As Roberts left the meeting room, she thought about how strange life could be. The universe had turned its back on humanity, but that rejection had forced them to rely on the very things that made them unique. Their simple technology, their ability to adapt, their willingness to help others even after being abandoned. These weren't weaknesses after all. They were humanity's greatest strengths. Thomas Reed never thought he'd see a room full of alien leaders begging for human help. Yet here he was, Earth's chief diplomatic officer, standing before representatives of 12 different species in the newly built Emergency Council chamber in Geneva. Please, the blue speaker of the Rigel colony said, his crystalline form trembling. The voidborn have already consumed 3 of our outer worlds. We need Earth's protection. Reed looked around the room. He saw fear in many different kinds of eyes, some with multiple pupils, some glowing, some barely visible behind protective masks. These were the same species that had once called humans barely evolved primates. The human defense forces will help, Reed said clearly, but we need to work together. No more separate battles. No more isolated stands. We form a united front, or we all fall. A tall, silver-skinned being stood up. Ambassador Light of Dawn. From the Centauri systems, you propose a coalition, with humans in command. Yes, Reed said firmly. Our weapons work. Our strategies work. And most importantly, we understand something that many of your civilizations forgot long ago: how to fight wars. The room grew quiet. In the past, humanity's warlike history had been seen as shameful, primitive. Now, that same history might save them all. Tell us your plan, Light of Dawn said. Reed touched a button on his podium. A holographic map of the galaxy appeared above them, showing the spread of voidborn attacks in red. First, we established joint defense stations at these points. He pointed to key positions. We'll teach your people how to build and use pulse weapons. We'll share our battle tactics. But in return, we need your resources and your trust. Trust. A reptilian delegate hissed. You ask much, human. We're asking you to trust the species that hasn't lost a single world to the voidborn, Reed countered. While your advanced civilizations are falling one by one, Earth's colonies stand strong. Maybe it's time to admit that newer isn't always better. The debate lasted hours. Reed stood his ground, supported by videos of successful human defenses against the voidborn. Finally, Light of Dawn rose again. We accept, the ambassador said. The Centauri systems will join your coalition. One by one, the others agreed. Even the reptilian delegate nodded grudgingly. Later that evening, Reed sat in his office, processing what had happened. His assistant, Jack Porter, brought him a cup of coffee. Quite a day, Porter said. Did you ever think you'd see the Rigel speaker bow to a human? Reed shook his head. I never wanted their submission. That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? Survival. Reed stood and walked to his window, looking out at the lights of Geneva. But not just survival. It's about proving that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. What is it then? Our ability to unite people, to take different groups, different ideas, different ways of fighting, and forge them into something stronger. Reed turned back to his assistant. Those aliens out there, they've spent thousands of years advancing their technology while letting their societies grow rigid, isolated. They forgot how to adapt, how to work together. A message flashed on Reed's screen. The first joint defense station was already under construction. Humans would train alien crews in the use of pulse weapons, while alien engineers would help strengthen Earth's ships. Sir, Porter said, reading another message. 3 more systems are requesting to join the coalition. They saw the news about today's meeting. Reed smiled. Send them the same terms we gave the others. Equal partnership under human military command. We protect each other, or we don't survive. As he prepared for the next day's meetings, Reed thought about how far humanity had come. 5 years ago, they were the abandoned children of the galaxy. Now they were its defenders, its teachers, its leaders. Not because they were stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because they remembered what the others had forgotten. That true civilization isn't about having the best technology. It's about standing together, adapting together, and fighting together. The Milky Way Coalition was born that day, and at its heart stood humanity, no longer the primitive species that needed guidance, but the teachers who would show the way forward. Sometimes, Reed thought, being left behind by the universe was the best thing that could have happened to them. Dr. Michael Hayes hadn't left his research lab in 3 days. Empty coffee cups littered his desk, and ancient books lay scattered around him. While other scientists studied the voidborn with advanced equipment, he had taken a different approach, looking to Earth's past. "Doctor, you need to sleep," said his research assistant, Lisa Ward, placing another coffee on his cluttered desk. "Can't sleep," Hayes mumbled, comparing an old Viking drawing to footage of a voidborn attack. "Look at this, Lisa. Look." On his screen, a dark mass of voidborn energy swirled and twisted. Next to it was an ancient drawing of Jörmungandr, the world serpent from Norse mythology. The patterns were almost identical. "They knew," he whispered. "Our ancestors knew something was wrong with the universe. They just didn't have the words to explain it." Lisa leaned closer. "What do you mean?" Hayes jumped up, suddenly energized. "Every ancient culture has stories about darkness trying to swallow the world. The Norse had Jörmungandr. The Chinese had Hunden. The Greeks had chaos. They weren't just stories. They were warnings." He pulled up more images on his screens, ancient drawings next to modern battle footage. The similarities were striking. "Get me Admiral Miller," Hayes said. "Now." An hour later, Hayes stood before the Coalition's Emergency Council. Human and alien leaders watched as he shared his findings. "The voidborn aren't invaders," Hayes explained, his tired eyes bright with excitement. "They're antibodies. The universe's immune system." "Explain," Admiral Miller demanded. Hayes pointed to his data. "Every living thing has an immune system that fights infection. When the body detects something wrong, it sends antibodies to attack the problem. That's exactly what the voidborn are doing." Ambassador Light of Dawn stood up. "You suggest we are an infection." "Not all of us," Hayes said. "Just certain technology. Look at the attack patterns." He showed a map of voidborn incidents. They target areas with the highest concentration of advanced space-time manipulation technology, the kind the Galactic Council used to perfect their civilizations. The room grew quiet as understanding dawned. "The Council didn't abandon us because they detected corruption," Hayes continued. "They ran because they knew they caused it. Their perfect technology was damaging the fabric of space-time itself. The universe is trying to heal itself." "But why don't they attack Earth as aggressively?" asked the blue speaker of Rigel. Hayes smiled. "Because we're primitive. Our technology doesn't manipulate space-time like yours does. We're not part of the infection. That's why our weapons work. They're simple enough to not trigger the universe's immune response, but strong enough to drive the voidborn back." Admiral Miller leaned forward. "Can you prove this?" Hayes nodded and pressed a button. A new image appeared, a microscopic view of human blood cells fighting bacteria. "Watch," he said, and played it side by side with footage of a voidborn attack. The patterns were identical. "The universe is alive," he said softly. "Not like we are, but alive all the same. And like any living thing, it protects itself. The Council's push for perfect technology was like a disease, and the voidborn are the cure." "Then we're doomed," the reptilian delegate hissed. "Our civilizations depend on this technology." No, Hayes said firmly. We're not doomed. We just need to change our approach. Humanity never reached the level of technological advancement that triggered this response. We can teach you how to step back, how to find a balance. Lisa, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. It's like taking medicine. Sometimes you need to let your fever run its course. Let your body's natural defenses do their job. Admiral Miller stood. Dr. Hayes, are you saying our best defense is to become more primitive? Not primitive, Hayes corrected. Natural. Balanced. The universe doesn't hate advancement. It hates the damage that comes from pushing too far, too fast. As the council erupted in debate, Hayes sat down, exhausted but satisfied. Humanity had been looked down on for being behind, for taking too long to advance. But now that same quality might save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. Sometimes, he thought, the oldest wisdom was the best wisdom. The ancestors had known it. The universe was alive, and like all living things, it had ways of protecting itself. Humanity hadn't fallen behind. They had stayed in balance, and now they could teach that balance to others, if they survived long enough to learn. Lieutenant Kate Foster stood in front of her experimental weapon, watching its core pulse with a soft blue light. The device looked rough compared to alien technology, all exposed metal and thick cables instead of sleek crystalline surfaces. But that was exactly the point. "Ready for the test, Lieutenant?" asked Chief Engineer Bill Parker, checking the safety controls one last time. "Ready as we'll ever be," Foster replied, adjusting her protective goggles. "Let's show them what Earth's junkyard science can do." Their lab, built in an old nuclear facility, was filled with a strange mix of salvaged alien tech and human nuclear components. What looked like scrap to their alien allies was about to change everything. "Beginning test sequence," Parker announced. "All personnel, clear the testing area." Foster watched through the thick observation window as their creation powered up. They called it the Harmony Pulse, a weapon that didn't just fight the voidborn, but could actually heal the damaged spacetime around them. The test target was a small piece of corrupted spacetime, contained in a special chamber. They had spent months figuring out how to safely collect samples for testing. "Power at 30%, Parker reported. "Core temperature stable." Foster held her breath. Their previous 17 attempts had failed, some spectacularly. The scorch marks on the ceiling told that story. 50%, 75%. The Harmony Pulse began to hum, its rough metal frame vibrating. Inside its core, nuclear energy mixed with modified alien tech in ways that would have horrified their advanced allies. "Full power," Parker shouted. A beam of pure white light shot from the device, hitting the corrupted sample. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the darkness in the sample began to swirl, like oil in water, before slowly fading away. "Are you seeing this?" Foster whispered, checking the readings. The corruption wasn't just gone. The space-time fabric was healing itself. "It worked," Parker said in disbelief. "It actually worked." Foster grabbed the test results and ran to the communication room. Within minutes, she was reporting to Admiral Miller and the Coalition Council through a holographic link. "The key was in the combination," she explained, showing them the data. "Our nuclear technology produces energy in a way that the universe recognizes as natural. When we combined it with modified alien tech, it created a harmonic resonance that—" "Simpler terms, Lieutenant," Admiral Miller reminded her gently. Foster nodded. "Sorry, sir. Basically, we made a device that speaks both languages, the natural language of the universe and the advanced language of alien technology. It can translate between them, helping restore balance to corrupted areas." "You're saying you can heal the damage?" Ambassador Light of Dawn asked, leaning forward. "We already did, in our test chamber," Foster replied. "The Harmony Pulse doesn't just drive the voidborn away. It fixes what attracted them in the first place." The council chamber erupted in excited discussion. Foster waited patiently as the aliens debated in various languages. "How soon can you build more?" Admiral Miller asked. "That's the best part, sir," Foster said with a smile. "We designed it using basic components. Any world with nuclear technology can build one. We can teach them how. And the alien technology required? Minimal. Just enough to create the bridge between old and new. We're not trying to change the universe anymore. We're working with it." The blue speaker of Ritel raised a crystalline hand. "But this means—" "Yes," Foster finished. "To save ourselves, advanced civilizations will need to step back, find a balance between progress and harmony, just like Earth did." Later that day, Foster stood with Parker in their lab, watching as teams began documenting everything for mass production. "You know what's funny?" Parker said. "All those years, aliens called us backwards because we still used nuclear power, because we hadn't fully embraced their advanced technology." Foster nodded. "And that's exactly what saved us. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." "Not just the old ways," Parker corrected. "The balanced ways. Look at this device. It's not purely old or new. It's both, working together." Foster touched the Harmony Pulse's rough metal surface. "Like humanity, we never gave up our past as we moved into the future, and now we can teach that balance to others." Outside their lab, the sun was setting. Somewhere out there, the voidborn were still coming. But for the first time since they appeared, humanity had more than just a weapon. They had a cure, and they would share it with everyone, even those who had once abandoned them. Because that's what humans do. They protect, they help, they save, even if it means saving the ones who turned away. Professor David Wilson didn't mean to change the universe. He was just trying to make the Harmony Pulse work better. But as he watched the old quantum gate suddenly flicker with life, he realized he'd stumbled onto something much bigger. "Run the test again," he ordered his team, his heart racing. "Make sure it's not a glitch." The abandoned quantum gate floated in space before them, its ancient metal frame scarred from 5 years of disuse. As the modified Harmony Pulse fired again, the gate's center flickered with familiar blue light. "Professor," his assistant, Robert Cole, called out, "we're picking up signals from the other side." Wilson grabbed the controls himself. The readings were clear. The gate wasn't just active, it was receiving transmission from outside their quarantined galaxy. "Get me Admiral Miller," he said. "Now." But before they could make the call, a message came through the gate. The holographic image that appeared made everyone in the room freeze. It showed aliens in council uniforms, watching them. "They've been here all along," Wilson whispered, "watching us." The council observers, realizing they'd been discovered, quickly cut their transmission. But it was too late. Wilson had recorded everything. An hour later, he stood before an emergency meeting of the coalition leadership, playing back the footage. "The gates were never fully closed," he explained. "The council kept a back door open to monitor us. Our modified Harmony Pulse accidentally tapped into their surveillance frequency." Admiral Miller's face was dark with anger. "So they abandoned us, but kept watching. Like we were some kind of experiment." "More like they were afraid," Wilson said. "Look at these readings. They've been monitoring every battle with the voidborn, every test of our weapons. They wanted to see if we'd survive." Ambassador Light of Dawn stood up. "Can you reopen the gates fully?" Wilson nodded. "Now that we know how they kept them partially active, yes. The Harmony Pulse technology can be modified to power up the entire network. We can break the quarantine." The room erupted in debate. Some wanted to confront the council immediately. Others feared retaliation. Wilson waited until the noise died down before speaking again. "There's something else you need to see," he said, playing another recording. This one showed council observers watching a Harmony Pulse test. Their expressions showed not fear or anger, but hope. "They're desperate," Wilson explained. "The corruption is spreading in other galaxies too. They've been watching us because we're their last hope." Admiral Miller leaned forward. You're saying they need us. They need what we discovered. The balance between old and new. The way to heal space-time instead of just fighting the voidborn. The blue speaker of Rigel raised a glowing hand. Then we have leverage. We have responsibility. Wilson corrected. Yes, they abandoned us. Yes, they spied on us. But if other galaxies are in danger, can we really turn our backs on them? The room grew quiet. Wilson looked around at the faces of humans and aliens alike, species that had learned to work together, to find balance, to survive. Professor, Admiral Miller said finally, how long would it take to reactivate the gate network? A few days to modify enough harmony pulse units. But sir, once we do this, everything changes. The Council will have to face what they did. Miller smiled grimly. Good, because I have a message for them. Later that night, Wilson stood in his lab, watching his team prepare the modified harmony pulse units. Each one would help reopen a quantum gate, rebuilding the bridges between galaxies. Do you think they'll listen? Cole asked, working beside him. The Council. Wilson looked at the proof of their surveillance, then at the harmony pulse glowing with its mixture of old and new technology. They'll have to. Because we're not asking permission anymore. We're showing them a better way. Outside the lab window, Earth glowed blue and peaceful. 5 years ago, the universe had turned its back on humanity. Now humanity would return, not as the primitive species they were thought to be, but as teachers of balance, of harmony, of survival. The Council had been watching them all along. Now it was time for them to learn. Admiral James Miller stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Hope, watching as the quantum gate blazed to life before them. After 5 years of isolation, they were about to make history. Again. All systems ready, reported Captain Jane Wright. The harmony pulse generators are stable. Miller nodded. Around them, the bridge crew worked at their stations, a mix of humans and aliens working together with quiet efficiency. 5 years ago, such cooperation would have seemed impossible. Open a channel to the Council, Miller ordered. The holographic screen flickered to life, showing the Grand Council chamber on the other side of the gate. High Counselor Vale sat in her crystalline throne, looking exactly as she had the day she announced the quarantine. But now her perfect composure showed cracks of worry. You have broken the quarantine, she stated. This is forbidden. Miller smiled. No, Counselor, we've healed it. Just like we're healing the galaxy you abandoned. He gestured to Dr. Hayes, who stepped forward with their data. The corruption spreads in your galaxies too, doesn't it? That's why you've been watching us. You needed to know if our solution worked. Vale's crystalline features flickered, a sign of distress in her species. You have no right to. We have every right, Miller interrupted. You turned your backs on us. But we didn't turn our backs on each other. Humans, Rigelians, Centaurians, we all worked together. We found a way to survive. And now we're offering to share it. The Council chamber erupted in whispers. Miller could see the fear in their faces, the same fear that had made them abandon an entire galaxy. Lieutenant Foster stepped forward, holding a small device, the latest version of the Harmony Pulse. This isn't just a weapon, she explained. It's a bridge between the old and the new, between progress and balance. Something you forgot was possible. You expect us to abandon our advanced technology? Another council member demanded. To become primitive like humans? No, Miller said firmly. We expect you to learn balance. Like we did. Like our coalition did. You don't have to give up advancement. You just have to remember what you left behind. He pressed a button, showing footage of their successes. Harmony pulses healing corrupted space. Former enemies working together. A galaxy learning to blend the old with the new. The universe isn't your enemy, Miller continued. It's not punishing you. It's trying to heal itself from the damage caused by unchecked progress. We can help with that healing. All of us, together. Vale stood slowly. And what are your terms? First, no more secrets. No more abandoning whole galaxies when things go wrong. We faced problems together. Miller looked around at his crew, human and alien alike. Second, the Coalition remains independent. We'll help you, teach you, work with you, but we're equals now. You dare demand equality with the Council? Vale asked, but her voice lacked its old authority. We earned it, Miller replied simply. The question is, are you wise enough to accept it? The silence stretched for a long moment. Miller could feel the weight of history in that silence. Humanity had started as the abandoned children of the galaxy. Now they stood as its saviors, its teachers, its hope. Finally, Vale bowed her head. We accept your terms, Admiral Miller. The Council acknowledges the Coalition as equals. Please, help us save our galaxies. Miller nodded. Prepare to receive our first team. Lieutenant Foster will show you how to build your own Harmony Pulse units. Dr. Hayes will explain the science. But most importantly, you'll learn what we learned. That true civilization isn't about having the most advanced technology. It's about finding balance. As the transmission ended, Miller looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the voidborn still moved through space, the universe's antibodies fighting against the corruption of unchecked progress. But now, finally, there was hope for true healing. Set course through the gate, he ordered. Let's show them how humanity does things. The Hope moved forward, its human and alien crew working together, its mix of old and new technology humming in perfect harmony. They had started this journey abandoned and alone. They would finish it as teachers, healers, and guides to a new way of living among the stars. Sometimes, Miller thought, you had to be left behind to find the way forward. The universe had turned away from humanity, but humanity had become its salvation. And that was just the beginning.